everything going to be okay?
Yes, we're here to help. You're safe now.
Into silence long before the sun disappeared. The last rays of twilight brushed the tops of houses, and the wind carried the crisp scent of falling leaves. Most children were already home, tucked safely behind warm windows, but 8-year-old Amelia Carter was still outside, walking home from her after-school art club. She loved drawing more than anything, drawing rainbows, drawing birds, drawing stories only she could imagine. But today, her sketchbook hung unusually still in her hand. Her steps were slower. Her eyes flicked from shadow to shadow. She wasn't alone. A few paces behind her walked a man she didn't recognize. Too close. Too quiet. He didn't call out to her or try to get her attention, but something about the way his footsteps matched hers made her heart beat faster. Amelia wasn't the type to scare easily. She was the kind of kid who rescued worms after storms and insisted on smiling at every stranger. But now she felt something she had never felt before, an instinctive, pulsing fear that told her something wasn't right. She gripped her sketchbook to her chest, her breaths shortening. 2 blocks ahead, parked near the corner of Maple Street, sat Officer Daniel Brooks with his partner, a K-9 police dog named Shadow. Shadow was a massive black German shepherd, known around town as the dog with the intelligent eyes, the dog who seemed to understand everything without being told. Daniel often joked that Shadow could read souls. Tonight, they were on a routine patrol shift, and Daniel was sipping lukewarm coffee when Shadow suddenly lifted his head, ears high, muscles tensing with silent alertness. Daniel lowered his cup. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Shadow didn't bark. He just stared toward the street, his body rigid, tail still. Then Daniel saw her, Amelia, small and fragile looking under the orange streetlights, walking faster than normal, her shoulders tight with fear. Behind her, the shape of a man drifted in and out of the dim light, not close enough to grab her, but close enough to unsettle anyone paying attention. Daniel instantly set down his cup and reached for the door handle, ready to step out. But Shadow moved before him. The dog placed one paw against the window, eyes locked on the child, then flicked his gaze back at Daniel. A silent signal, a request. Something was wrong. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. Amelia turned her head slightly and her eyes met Shadow's through the police car window. Her lower lip trembled. She didn't scream. She didn't wave. She didn't dare. Instead, she pressed her hand against her thigh twice, the tiny gesture trembling like a leaf. It was a signal she had learned months earlier after watching a video about how to ask for help without alerting someone dangerous. A secret cry, a silent plea. Shadow understood. It wasn't a command Daniel had taught him. It wasn't something written in any training manual. But the dog reacted instantly, letting out one deep, urgent bark that reverberated through the car, a bark Daniel had heard only twice before, once during a domestic violence rescue and once when he saved a toddler trapped inside a burning shed. It was Shadow's emergency cry, the sound that meant, "Move now." Daniel flung open the door. Shadow shot out like lightning. The moment the man behind Amelia saw the large German shepherd sprinting toward them, he hesitated. His steps faltered, fear flickered across his face. Daniel called out, identifying himself and ordering the man to stop. Startled and confused, the stranger looked between the officer, the dog, and the child. Then he turned and bolted toward the alley. Shadow didn't chase him. Instead, he skidded to a halt right beside Amelia, positioning his large body between her and any danger. The dog nudged her gently with his nose as if asking, "Are you okay?" Amelia exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her knees wobbled. Daniel jogged toward them, radio already in hand. Officers down the street intercepted and detained the man within minutes. But Amelia didn't watch any of that. She stood frozen, her fingers digging into her sketchbook until they left dents in the cardboard. Her eyes were wide but focused entirely on the dog standing protectively beside her. "You did the right thing," Daniel said softly as he approached. "You signaled us. That was very brave." But Amelia shook her head, her voice hardly more than a whisper. "I didn't signal you. I signaled him." Shadow lowered his head and gently pressed it against her arm. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The street was quiet again, the hum of distant traffic the only sound. Amelia slowly sank to her knees, wrapped her arms around Shadow's neck, and began to cry, not loud sobs, but soft, tired tears of relief. Shadow stood still, patient, letting her cling to him as if he'd been waiting for this moment all night. What Daniel didn't know, what no one knew, was that Amelia had always been afraid of dogs. She had been bitten at age 5 by a neighbor's out-of-control pit bull, and ever since then, she avoided dogs of every size. But Shadow didn't feel like a dog to her. He felt like a guardian. When she finally pulled away, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket, she looked up at Daniel. "Can I sit with him? Just for a minute?" Daniel smiled. "Of course you can." He opened the back door of the patrol car, and Shadow hopped inside. Amelia followed, sitting beside him. The dog placed his huge head on her lap, and her trembling hand rested on his fur. The warmth calmed her in ways she didn't know she needed. Daniel watched through the open door as Amelia finally caught her breath. There was something powerful, something nearly sacred, about the bond forming right in front of him. He had seen people rescued before, seen lives change because of Shadow, but something about this moment was different. It felt deeper, like Shadow hadn't just protected Amelia's life, he had healed something inside her. Later that night, after the officers confirmed that the man following Amelia had a history of suspicious behavior, Amelia's mother arrived in tears, hugging her daughter so tightly that Amelia squeaked in embarrassment. But her mother's gratitude turned into stunned silence when she heard the full story, how Amelia had given a silent signal, how Shadow had recognized it, how the dog had sprinted to her rescue without hesitation. She knelt beside the patrol car and looked directly into Shadow's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing her." Shadow licked Amelia's hand in response. Over the next days, the story spread around town like wildfire. People called it a miracle. They called Shadow a genius. They called the moment unforgettable. But to Amelia, it meant something else. A sense of safety she had not felt in years, and a belief that heroes didn't need capes or badges or superpowers. Sometimes, a hero simply needed to listen when no one else could. Her school invited Officer Daniel and Shadow for a visit. When they entered the gymnasium filled with children, laughter erupted, tiny hands waving to the dog that had saved someone just like them. Shadow remained calm, focused, but his tail wagged at the sight of Amelia waiting in the front row, a brand new drawing held in her hands. It was a sketch of Shadow, majestic, brave, and powerful, standing between a small girl and a dark shadow behind her. Under it, she had written 6 words that made Daniel's throat tighten. Silent cry, brave bark, saved me. When she handed the drawing to Daniel, she whispered, "I'm not scared of dogs anymore." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's because one dog knew you needed him." Shadow pressed his nose against Amelia's cheek, and she giggled for the first time in days. Months passed, and Amelia's life slowly returned to normal. She walked to and from school with her friends instead of alone. She joined a children's art program at the community center and began creating paintings inspired by moments of courage, tiny acts of bravery that often went unnoticed. And every week, without fail, she visited the police station to bring Shadow a new drawing, each one more colorful and imaginative than the last. Shadow collected them proudly on a wall Daniel jokingly called Shadow's Art Gallery. But the biggest change was in Amelia herself. The fear that had once clung to her like a shadow had begun to dissolve. She spoke more confidently, laughed more easily, and even volunteered at an animal rescue shelter, gently petting puppies and older dogs who needed socialization. Her mother watched these changes with gratitude and awe, knowing they began on the night her daughter signaled a silent cry, and a brave bark answered. One evening near the anniversary of that night, Amelia's mother invited Daniel and Shadow for dinner. Daniel politely declined the dinner but accepted the invitation to stop by afterward with Shadow for a short visit. When they arrived, Amelia ran out to greet them, this time with no hesitation at all. Shadow wagged his tail wildly, a rare display of excitement only Amelia ever seemed to bring out in him. "Come see," Amelia said, grabbing Daniel's hand. She led them to her room, where a framed drawing hung above her bed. It was the first drawing she had made after the rescue, the sketch of Shadow standing protectively beside her. Around it, dozens more drawings were pinned in a sprawling collage of colors, shapes, and scenes of kindness. A firefighter saving a kitten. A neighbor helping an elderly woman cross the street. A teacher comforting a crying student. And in the center of the collage, A girl pressing her hand against her thigh, a quiet signal of fear and hope intertwined. Daniel stared at the wall in silence. It wasn't just art, it was Amelia's heart, displayed with courage and vulnerability. "You made all of these?" he asked softly. Amelia nodded. "I want people to remember that even small signals matter. Even small actions can save somebody." Shadow nudged her gently again, as though proud of her. Her mother stepped forward, her voice warm but emotional. "That night changed her. It made her stronger, more fearless, and it reminded all of us that goodness still exists in the world." Daniel swallowed hard. Shadow just did what any dog would do. "No," Amelia said firmly. "He did what a hero does." Shadow rested his head on her lap, closing his eyes, content in the comfort of the girl he had saved. As the night drew to a close, Daniel turned to leave, but Amelia called out. "Wait, I have one more thing." She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small notebook, her sketchbook. The same one she had carried on the night she was followed. The same one she had clutched in fear. Now, she flipped to the last page and tore it out carefully before handing it to Daniel. It was a drawing of her older self, tall, confident, smiling, wearing a police uniform beside a grown, graying Shadow. Below it she had written, "Future partner." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "You want to be an officer?" "No," Amelia said. Then she smiled. "I want to be someone who helps the world the way Shadow helped me." And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth. Heroes don't just save lives, they inspire them. As Shadow and Daniel walked back to the patrol car, Amelia waved from the porch. Her voice echoed across the quiet street. "Tell Shadow I'll keep drawing him. Forever." Shadow barked once. Just once, but it was enough. It was his way of saying he heard her. Years later, people would still talk about that night. About the little girl with the silent signal. About the dog who understood her without words. About how one brave bark changed everything. And about how an act of courage, however small, can ripple outward and shape the life of someone who will one day change the world in return. Because sometimes the loudest cries for help are seen, not heard. Sometimes the strongest heroes have 4 legs and gentle eyes. And sometimes the moment that defines a life begins with nothing more than a silent cry, and a brave bark that answers.